Hello and welcome to another episode of Munro Live. I'm Chris Fox, Clif Wells. This is going to be the introduction to our long-term ADAS video. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through the different parts of what makes up an ADAS. We're going to go through the levels of autonomy as dictated by SAE. And then for each of the sensors, we'll show where they are, what they're used for, and some of the pros and cons. So let's dive right in then. On this side of the table, we have the parts laid out approximately where they would be in the car. So the first and foremost, the two most important sensors in most vehicles are going to be the forward-facing radar and the forward-facing camera. One of those two is going to be necessary for level 1 autonomy. Level 1 autonomy says the vehicle can do either steering or braking control, but not both. Once we reach level 2, we'll probably still have these, but then that means the vehicle can handle steering and braking simultaneously. Level 3, we can do that a bit more with less driver interaction, which is more eyes off, hands off to an extent. The driver should still be paying attention, should still be in the driver's seat at all times. Level 4 is when we make that next big jump, when meaning that the driver no longer really has to be in the vehicle. There's only a handful of level 4 vehicles out there right now. There's the Daimler, I'm trying to blank on the name of the truck, that is geofenced in the state of Nevada. And then the Mercedes EQS or EQ5? EQS is certified level 4 in the state of California within certain areas. And then level 5 is like the holy grail of all of this. That's the end game. That is no more driver, no more steering wheel, none of that. The vehicle does everything all on its own under all conditions. So back to sensors. Okay, so forward-facing radar, all this is going to do, this is generally a dumb sensor. That is going to radiate out radar waves, and then those are going to hit an object in front of the vehicle, and then they're going to reflect back. And because the ECU that controls all this knows that speed, it figures, okay, it's been this long since I emitted, this long since I transmitted, it does the math, and it figures there's something a certain distance away from me. Radar is good from the standpoint that it really is difficult to fool. It doesn't differentiate what it's seeing, it just says there is something out there. Whereas the camera can differentiate through the ECU in the process saying this is a person, this is a car, this is a bicycle, and it can then prioritize what it wants to avoid. The radar doesn't do that, it just says there's a thing. The real magic in ADAS is getting those two to communicate and do the sensor fusion of which sensor takes priority, which one gets to make the decision under which circumstance. Like for instance, if there's a little rock in the road or a Coke can or something like that, that's not a credible threat, car should keep on going. The radar is going to say, hey, there's something here, we should stop. The camera can then override and say, no, it's not worthwhile, just keep on going. On the flip side, if the vehicle is sun blinded, coming up a hill against the sun, there's like a bright white panel van or something there, the camera can say, I don't see anything, we can keep going. But the radar will detect that. That's where sensor fusion comes into play, and that's a really difficult task to do.
Thanks, Chris. So now we'll dive into the forward-facing camera. So this is up on the windshield and kind of in the center of the vehicle and the windshield high up so it can see the road, see what's going on. And basically this is how you control your lane keeping assist, your lane centering. There's a lot of different features that are made possible by that. And as Chris mentioned, these are dumb sensors, and so they're just taking the raw signal and then sending that out, and then that all gets transferred to this module, which then does the actual processing of those signals from the different parts of the ADAS system and fuses them together, and then it sends that signal out to the different parts of the vehicle in order to control, steer, slow down, speed up. And so there's several different implementations. Some manufacturers do it where they have smart sensors, and then they have a much smaller module, or they offload the sensors from the actual cameras and radars and then package them all in one module to save some efficiencies in packaging that way. And so we're seeing a lot more manufacturers go to dumb sensors and then packaging all of that into one processing module. That seems to be the general trend right now. And then we also have this telematics module. And so that's doing over-the-air updates. It's also doing HD mapping in some instances. And then that also fuses together with your control module to give you kind of some geofencing and allow you to drive on those marked off roads.
It's important to note that when you're driving, your vehicle is recording, sending this data back to the homeland, if you will, whoever the OEM is. And especially if there's an abrupt stop or a near miss or a hit, the vehicle is going to record that. That's going to be transmitted via the TCU to be analyzed. And that's how OEMs start fixing what's called fringe cases. It's pretty easy to do adaptive cruise and whatnot normally, but under these weird conditions like snow, rain, ice, they need more data to start supporting that. So that's why it's going to send data via your TCU back. They're going to analyze it, and then they're going to take those lessons learned and bring it back down to every vehicle. So every time you drive, you're actually helping everyone else on the road with that.
That's a great point, Chris. All right, so continuing to move rearward in the vehicle here, we have your corner radars, which do your blind spot and cross-traffic alert. We have a rear camera, so when you put it into reverse, that's how you get the image on your HMI screen that shows you what's behind you. And then we also have another suite of ultrasonic sensors. These 4 in your bumper, and then these 2 are on the side. And you'll notice there's a color difference. That's because these 2, coupled with the 2 that are in the front, are used for the automatic parking aid. And they're a little bit smarter of a sensor, a little bit better fidelity on data to help with centering you in that parking space and in automatic parking aid. We've actually seen that starting to go away and just functioning off of the 4 sensors in the back. Some companies are actually even starting to get rid of the front 4 sensors, like Tesla. And so it's been interesting to see how they're starting to realize that they can do other features or do features in different ways using better hardware, such as Tesla with using the camera now for ultrasonics instead. So that's very interesting.
So coming back to smart versus dumb sensors, Cliff, you mentioned this is a dumb camera, and that's the ECU. Generally what we're seeing is as OEMs approach level 3, when we make that jump from 2 to 3, we start to see more and more of the centralized computing. Whereas in a level 1 or a vehicle that's never planning to leave level 2, they will take a good chunk of this and build it into the camera. And it ends up being roughly this kind of a footprint. Upside of that is we're not running coaxial cables or Ethernet, which are one of the more expensive cable options per unit length. So if we have that centralized ECU with the camera for level 1, level 2, that's a lower cost option, but it's also much more limited in its capabilities.
Right. So that comes down to a corporate strategy level where you're starting to see the costs balancing. I guess if they have higher aspirations for further levels of autonomous or ADAS, then they'll start integrating features into more of a centralized place to allow the architecture to support a lot of that. Whereas the lower levels, as Chris mentioned, they kind of leave that processing in the actual module itself or the camera itself.
So from what we've learned so far, most OEMs are focusing on achieving level 3, and that seems to be about where they want to stop, at least to date when we're recording this. Past level 3, it seems to be that's where the robotaxi and upfitters live, say your Waymo, your Baidu's, your Pony AIs, and so on and so forth. We haven't come across an OEM who's really, really going after an L4, and then L5 seems to be pretty much Department of Defense for the most part. The critical sensor difference when we move from L2 into L3, in most cases, is going to be a driver monitoring camera. Now, those are required in the European Union just to make sure the driver is awake and paying attention. The US, I believe, is bringing that requirement over. But in order to make sure the driver is still in the seat and still kind of paying attention, that's where the driver monitoring camera comes into play. So this is what allows you to do some hands-off driving. Normally on an L2, you have to keep your hands on the wheel or maybe loosen your grip so you can kind of focus on or not focus as much on the road. But that distinction for level 3 means you should be able to take your hands off the wheel for a shorter period or a longer period of time. Still, stay in the driver's seat, please. No matter what an OEM promises, these are not magic. They don't break the laws of physics.
Just because you have the capability doesn't mean sit there on your phone the entire time. You still have to be paying attention to the road and maintain proper control of the vehicle in case it needs you to step in case of an emergency or anything.
Yeah, so stepping in, that's what most OEMs will call disengage. So when the ADAS is doing its thing, it's controlling 3 outputs: power, steering, and braking. When the vehicle disengages, that means the car says, okay, human, you take over. I don't know what to do, or I'm not allowed to do this. Say,
it runs out of map, or there's
like the Hasco L2 system, for example. When it starts raining, as soon as it detects rain, it will disengage and say, I am not qualified as an ADAS vehicle to do the driving. Human, that's on you now. So that's called disengaging. And that's why it's very critical, no matter what an OEM says, you should be in the driver's seat still paying attention to take the wheel in the event it does disengage. Because if you're in the back seat doing whatever, you won't be able to respond fast enough.
Well, and always remember, it's your vehicle, you're in charge of it. Just because it has ADAS capabilities does not mean you get out of your responsibility for what happens with that vehicle.
Speaking of responsibilities, going back to the levels of autonomy, because quite a few OEMs out there are advertising it's L2+, which is not an official SAE standard. L2+ means they want to market it like it's an L3 and make it sound fancier and cooler, more high tech.
But they don't have.
But they want to shoulder the liability of an L2, so it's totally a cheat system.
Yeah, kind of a misnomer, a very big asterisk, if you will.
Yes. All right. Okay, so this is a radar. In most vehicles, you'll have minimum 1 in the front, 2 in the rear. When we start to get into an L2 to 3, it's pretty common, we'll have another 2, 1 each front corner. So the front one is used for adaptive cruise control and for automatic emergency braking. Automatic emergency braking was mandated, I think, this year, last year, relatively recent.
Yeah, 22 or 23, I think.
So automatic emergency braking means if you're still driving and your ADAS suite picks something up, it's going to apply the brakes because you weren't paying attention. That's what AEB is. Whether it's a car that stopped in front of you or a person who walked in front of you, the radar should pick that up and stop. Likewise, the forward-facing camera can be used for that as well. When we start to get to automatic overtaking, so that's when we take adaptive cruise control to the very next level of, okay, this person in front of me is going too slow, they're driving me crazy. I'm going to put my turn signal on so I can get around this vehicle. In order for your vehicle to know when to cross back over, we have to rely on our corner radar. So there'll be 1 in each corner in the front for that, and then 1 in each corner in the rear. And they're basically the same functionality, the basic unit. Sometimes they have brackets that go to the body, sometimes they're in the fascia. And to every OEM, that's a really nasty battle to fight because styling wants to have certain curves on the fascia, which doesn't allow the radar to be packaged.
Well, and also transmissivity.
That's a really tough word, yeah.
of the external bodywork. There's always a big fight because you have to be able to make it through the material. Otherwise, it'll just block the signal and it will really limit the functioning of your radar. So you have to build that into your bodywork, which also causes a lot of problems because usually they're not super convenient or they need to be in a specific location. It's always a fight between studio and the actual engineering hardware side of things.
Yeah, so if they do body mounted, there's a trade-off here. If it's body mounted, that's an upcharge to the OEM, the manufacturer, and by extension, the customer has to pay for that as well because now this is not coming PIA, part in assembly, or purchased in assembly, depending on the OEM, to a subassembly. If this was fascia mounted, that's less expensive to the OEM, but it's more expensive to insure that vehicle because it's our car score. Our car basically dictates how easy a vehicle is to repair, dictates how how expensive it is to insure. And so if you crack a fascia and one is mounted to the fascia, generally the policy is this.
You got to replace all
this
of it. Yep.
$30 to $70 radar, just chuck it.
Yep. Well, I'm sure people have gotten in minor fender benders that have a lot of this technology have noticed their bill has gone through the roof because now no longer do you just have a bumper. You have all these ultrasonics, you have these radars, you have all this other hardware, and it might get cracked or moved or the mount might break. And so there's been kind of a follow-on effect in the industry where insurance repairs, everything have started to just go up exponentially just due to the cost of all this additional hardware. And if it gets thrown out of whack, even a millimeter or two, it will throw off the entire system and it won't function. And so that's kind of an interesting side effect that we have started to see propagate throughout the industry.
So when it comes to radar, we used to use the forward-facing one as our longest range. That was typically 77, 78 gigahertz. And the corner ones were typically lower in like the 60 gigahertz, just because they didn't need that range. So frequency and range would be proportional in radar. To leverage what's called economies of scale, because if an OEM is doing this right, they're going to buy all the same radar.
Yep.
Now their volume, instead of buying one expensive radar, now they're buying 5 of them, and they can get a better price. So most of them.
Then it's just a software programming thing.
Correct.
So it's all 77 gigahertz, but then you just extend your range of perception, I guess, in the software. So it's capable of doing the full range, but you just limit it to a short range radar, a medium range radar in the software, and then it just limits itself. Do you want to talk about LiDAR as well? So we don't have one here just because it's not in the system, but we're starting to see that with a lot of higher levels of ADAS.
So LiDAR is relatively newer, at least in automotive. So the Audi MLB platform, so it would have been the A8, the Q7, the e-tron at the time, were the first vehicles that I'm aware of to get LiDAR in production. And then the Lucid Air was the first one in the United States. Despite religious zealotry revolving around LiDAR, it has its pros and its cons. How about we start there? So like with the radar, it's just pinging. It doesn't identify what it sees. It just says, there's something here, it's that distance. A camera can start to actually identify what something is, whether it's a person, it's a road sign, it's
bicycle.
a car, bicycle or e-bike for whatever reason. Why do you differentiate that?
Person, yeah.
And the difference is, okay, so radar is very hard to fool, but a camera is more capable. So there's kind of that trade-off there. LiDAR fills that niche in that it still pings, it still knows how far something is, but now it has the resolution to start identifying what that something is.
Yep. So it kind of fuses the benefits of both, but the con
of both too.
Yes, exactly. It's also very expensive. It's also very easily fooled or causes issues with weather. So.
Yes.
Typical
radar.
example today, crazy snow day, your LiDAR would not be able to work very well just because the light would reflect off of all the snow and everything, and it would really cause problems. So that's why you kind of start to see redundancy, where you have a LiDAR coupled with a camera, coupled with a radar, and you kind of get a feel out of everything. And then the processing module can determine, based off of all 3 of those, it can kind of triangulate a position, or, if one doesn't work, you still have 2 others that can take over that role and help out.
Yeah, so cameras,
obviously, when they're all working is better,
yes.
But you're not going to be totally lost at sea.
And that does help with the fringe cases as well, of like, okay, this says there's something there, that says I think it's a person, and then the LiDAR says, no, that's just a trash can, that's okay.
Right, it overrules. And that comes down to kind of another side of this is the software programming of all that. So you have all this data and all these sensors sending information to the module. Some of the secret sauce, if you will, is what do you do with all that? You got a radar telling you that you have something right in front of you, and your camera's like, I don't see anything. Who makes that call? And that really comes down to a lot of just miles driven, and a lot of that is very proprietary info of all the data that they're collecting and infusing all that sensor data together to say that no, that actually radar is seeing something and the camera is malfunctioning or something like that. And then you get into a very weird legality, liability area when you have those weird cases. And that's why the government has been very hesitant to award a lot of these licenses and all of that. Just the companies need to show that they are safe and they're capable of deciphering between those.
So it's a very delicate balance with the sensors of the more capable they are, generally the easier they are to fool, like Clif mentioned, like snow, wind, or heavy winds, rain, particulate matter, whatnot, like dust and road debris. Those can really throw off a camera really easily, whereas radar is really difficult to fool. There's always that one guy in all of our workshops, but stealth technology, it's like, okay, stealths are difficult to make in the first place, okay? And if your daily commute requires you to avoid missile attacks, I want to know your story. So for the lower speed sensors, as Cliff mentioned, we had the ultrasonics. These are only used for parking aid. So this is going to be sub 10 miles an hour generally.
Yeah, very low speed. They're only going about, 5 or 6 feet maybe range?
8 at tops, yeah.
Yeah, and so very short range. It's only just seeing if, there's somebody immediately behind you, or if there's another car when you're trying to do the APA feature. But yeah, those are very, very short range, very cheap sensors, by the way. Those are spread out over millions of units, and so those have come down dramatically in cost. Very easy to make, very, very low fidelity data.
Now, some vehicles at the L1, L2, if they have the parking, so technically these don't really play into account with a full ADAS. You can have these and still be L0 with nothing, L1,
right.
2.
That's why those have been on a lot of base packages.
Correct.
Or, a lot of different lower packages that don't have the ADAS. That's kind of like your standard, I guess, level 1 base safety package might feature some park assist ultrasonic sensors, and then maybe just your two radars and a camera or something is like a base set of hardware.
So it's really obnoxious from a wiring standpoint and an engineering standpoint about these is that if these are in a painted part of the fascia, there's got to be a cap that goes over it to match that. Yep. Which means for every fascia variant means I have to have a new one of these sourced and spec'd and everything else.
And match body color.
Yeah, match body color. It's got to get the UV and the salt sprayed.
You'll notice, so this is from a gray vehicle, and then this was off kind of in the side. So it's a different color, but they have to color match every single one of these to every vehicle. So you can imagine how difficult that gets.
You can have easily a minimum of like 5 different fascia harness options. It means that you have to have 5 separate ones of these as well, which is why we typically harp on to OEMs, please put these in a matte finish area. That way it's always the same color and I don't have to re-release it.
Then you don't get rid of the paint, save some costs there, and then millions of units, that adds up very quick.
Yeah, because these will be in the ballpark of like $7-ish a piece. OEM cost, don't go to AutoZone and quote me on that one. They're going to charge you way more for it. This is at OEM cost. Radars are going to be, depending on the type, are going to be somewhere between 30 to 75-ish. Cameras are all over the board, generally starting at about 30, and it really heavily depends on whether it's a dumb sensor like this or it's a smart one.
So a lot of the majority of the cost is actually the Mobileye processor that's doing the sensor fusion. And so at least 2/3 of the cost can be just that one chip. The lenses, the actual PCB, everything is pretty low cost components overall. Still pretty high tech, but as Chris mentioned, if you take it out of the camera itself and then you move it over to the module, you're just shell trading essentially. Your costs of your module just went up a ton. But you can package this, because a lot of the concerns for this are heat, because it's up on the top of the windshield.
Sun loading.
And so if you have that really, really heavy duty chip that's in there, you have to overbuild that and overspec it because it's putting out a ton of heat. And so that causes some considerations that have to be made. Whereas if you remove that sensor and put it somewhere that can be better cooled or is lower in the vehicle, you can now make that a little bit cheaper and then have a much smaller housing, much smaller board. So you save a bunch there.
Yeah, so as Cliff mentioned, Mobileye is pretty much the industry standard for camera systems in an ADAS. They've been around for 30 plus years or something like that.
And they actually got bought by Intel.
Correct, yes. So they're at a very unique advantage in the industry right now, not only because they're owned by Intel or have a partnership, whatever, which means semiconductor shortage, not really an issue for them because like your company makes semiconductors already, so they're golden there. And now that automatic emergency braking has been mandated, that's got to be in every single vehicle right now.
Yep.
So
they stand to benefit huge from that.
So that means they can charge basically almost whatever they want, and there's no way out of it for an OEM. So now every OEM is trying to find ways away from Mobileye to develop it themselves, so they're not held hostage, if you will, by Mobileye. Not that Mobileye's bad. They do some really good stuff, and they've been around the longest. Their image libraries are phenomenal.
They are the de facto go-to for this space. And Mobileye is synonymous with the ADAS camera applications just because they've been there from the beginning.
Not only that, but they license it to almost every other tier one as well. There's Mobileye hardware in Continental units. There's some in Mitsubishi units. There's some in Mobis units. Bosch is the one that's oddly missing, and I don't know why, but you can get Mobileye hardware in pretty much everything else. But you have, as an OEM, you have the choice, do I want to put it in a camera or do I want to put it in the ADAS ECU? Now, when we start hitting level 3, then our ADAS ECU, as we see here, this is a pretty big board, all things considered, in the automotive landscape. So we've got to have our processor, our memory, our graphics processor.
You got a lot of connections going in there.
Yeah, all of that takes board space. And typically, for a circuit board, we'll typically see in automotive about 4 layers. An ADAS board typically starts to approach 10, and that gets much more expensive.
If not more.
Yeah. Basically, board layers is proportional to cost. There's a trade-off. Do I want it to be fewer layers but a wider footprint, means the larger space claim, or because I have to force this somewhere, usually around a center console or under a seat?
Right, you gotta smush it.
Yeah,
but then your board cost just goes up like crazy because it's a much higher spec. So
there's some nasty trade-offs to be had there. But generally, L2, these will be passively cooled, like this one here. This is off the Ford system. This is their IPM, image processing module.
So you see this is some potting material where all of these chips then mirror image fit in here, and then that just pulls the heat off to these fins and cools it off passively. We're starting to see applications with active cooling, believe it or not, though, just because they have so much hardware in there that's pumping out so much heat, processing so much data that they can't survive. So they're starting to actually active cool, in some cases liquid cool, which is even a further step. So that's pretty wild.
Yes, that adds additional cost as well. And then Interior doesn't like it. NVH guys don't like it now. So the first step in active cooling is to add a fan. Well, now that we have a fan, where do I package that? How am I pulling air in? How am I getting it out without driving the occupants crazy with that buzz all the time or like cooking their ankles? And then if I liquid cool it, that pretty much forces you to put that on the dash panel like Tesla does, because that's the minimum possible distance to your cooling pack. You could do it off the underbody, but then our cost starts to skyrocket because now I have a longer length runs, I have more fittings, I need a bigger pump.
Not to mention opportunity for quality and issues for service down the line. So yeah, you want to stay away from that as much as possible.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to live demonstrations to show you what the different levels of autonomy are and what their different functions are.
Hi, my name is Sandy Munro. I'm Executive Director for ADAS here at Ford Motor Company. I'm also CEO of Latitude, which is the wholly owned subsidiary by Ford that's developing level 3 self-driving technology. All right, as we walk around this 2023 model year Mustang Mach-E GT, I want to talk about all the sensors that are mounted on the car. And we can start with the front windshield camera that's right here in the middle of the top of the front windshield. This is being the main camera that's being used to detect any kind of lane lines in front of the vehicle, any kind of object, pedestrians, cyclists, cars, trucks, etc. They're being combined with 4 radars that are being mounted all around the car. One here in the fascia, one on the other side, and 2 off the rear. This gives us full 360-degree perception of all objects around the vehicles, all the way up to around 200 meters distance in each direction. In addition, we have 12 ultrasonics, 6 in the front. You can see them here. These are these small knobs here. And 6 in the back. We also have sensors inside the car, in particular the driver monitoring camera, to make sure that when we do unlock level 2 autonomy, that this needs to happen with the customer, with the driver in lockstep. So we want to make sure that the customer is paying attention. So this is one of the key things to make sure that we detect whether the customer is drowsy, whether they're paying attention, whether they're using the phone, etc. So we're driving Blue Cruise 1.3 here on this Mach-E. And now here you see it says Blue Cruise available. Press this Blue Cruise button to activate. So this is this button here. So you can just like press this and it will pick up the speed that it will activate. There you go. So Blue Cruise on, Munro, be prepared to resume control. So now we can just like let go of the hands, and that's it. We can It will observe all the traffic around us, in front of us, as well as in neighboring lanes right next to us. If you want to increase or decrease set speed, it will do so automatically. If it perceives any kind of speed sign, where there's a change in speed, then we'll adjust that. But in addition, we can just use this toggle here to increase or decrease speed as we would like. We can also change lanes. So for example, if I would prefer to go on the left lane, I can simply change the blinker and it will automatically change lanes. If there was like a other vehicle in the target lane where we want to lane change into, or maybe there's like a solid line that doesn't allow us to do lane change into that lane, the system will perceive that and will not do the lane change. Or if suddenly like there is a actor that's approaching very, very fast, it would also say, hey, let's not do a lane change. And so sometimes there's large vehicles around us, or we're not feeling, maybe you do feel more comfortable if you can put your hands on the steering wheel. That's of course perfectly fine, even though it's a hands-free system. The way that we designed the system is that it's truly collaborative. It's not just either us or the car being in control, but this also can be collaborative. So we do have a feature called inlane biasing that will bias away from large cars. So for example, now you see here, we are moving a little bit to the left of our lane to go away from this car here. But if we feel like we want to go slightly differently, we could totally do that, right? So for example, I can engage with the steering wheel, I can control it to go a little bit more to the left, however we would like to. So it doesn't just automatically kick you out when you start touching the steering wheel like in some of the other systems, but it's more like a collaborative experience. We also look at this data, like we look at through connected vehicle data, hey, where do our customers start touching the steering wheel, and maybe changing where and how the car is driving, or for example, when our customers take over. We look at all this data and then try to see, hey, how can we improve our systems that our customers reduce the amount of time where they feel like, hey, they may need to take control, they may need to take over, or they may want to control the steering wheel. And that's how, for example, between 1.2 and 1.3, we had a 5 times reduction in intervention rate from the customers. And with 1.4, there's another pretty dramatic improvement in terms of how often the customers is in fact touching the steering wheel. And so where now that you're on a highway, you can you can go for many, many miles without touching the steering wheel. So in addition, we for us, this is a level 2 system, meaning that we require the driver, the customer, to pay attention to what's happening outside. This is not a level 3 or level 4 system. These are so-called eyes-off systems where you don't need to pay attention to the outside world. So for this, we have a so-called driver monitoring camera that you see here, and this is see now, because I was covering it, it's starting to kind of to honk at me. And so the point is that we continuously monitor that the customer is paying attention, and if we see for several seconds that you're not paying attention, you first start with a visual warning in the cluster, then an audible warning, and eventually we even start brake checking, meaning like the car starts moving to the point where you actually start slowing down in lane to bring the car into what we call a safe state. So we have this escalation strategy that's based on the driver-facing camera. So this is BlueCruise 1.3 here. We started launching BlueCruise 1.0 in 2021 on both F-150 as well as Mach-E, and since then we've brought BlueCruise on a large variety of Ford and Lincoln vehicles across the fleet. And so as we look at customer feedback through both direct customer feedback as well as through connected vehicle data, we started improving BlueCruise across many different dimensions. Started adding a lot more capability, for example, lane changes, in-lane biasing, curb speed control, but also just general performance improvements, like, for example, reducing the amount of time where customers need to touch the steering wheel, or also how stable we are in one lane. As part of that, we now have a relatively large install base of BlueCruise capable vehicles, meaning vehicles, Ford and Lincoln vehicles, that have the necessary hardware, so sensors and compute, to run BlueCruise. So as we improve BlueCruise, we now can use OTA to deploy updates for BlueCruise across the whole vehicle lineup, meaning also vehicles that we sold, like model year 21 or 22 vehicles, like an F-150, will receive BlueCruise 1.3 and future BlueCruise updates. We think about our vehicles in the context of BlueCruise, we think about them as, like mobile phones, where, if you get an iPhone, you continuously get updates for a number of years. And we think about BlueCruise in the exact same way. And this is why we're working very hard to have a homogeneous install base in terms of what is the software and what is the hardware and sensors that we deploy, that we can then upgrade that whole fleet as we develop new upgrades. Now we see there's like a large vehicle right next to us, and what we saw is customers are a little bit uncomfortable being so close, so they steer the vehicle away. And so now we actually automated that. As you can see here, the vehicle is now moving more towards the left side of the lane here. So as we detect large vehicles with our radars and our camera, we then bias the vehicle in lane to kind of mimic what human drivers would do, right? So our approach, in particular, as we scale BlueCruise, not just to the tech community, but to the larger Ford community as a whole, meaning these are not just tech people, but people of all different kinds of walks of lives. It is at the very core of our focus to build a human-like system that behaves on the highway in a natural and humanistic way. And so these kind of things, like how we do lane changes, or how we move away from bigger trucks, how we drive through curves, how we adjust the speed on the highway. We want to have BlueCruise drive not like a robot, but more like a human drive, like you and I would drive. And we spend a lot of focus on that.
What is going on, everybody? My name is Chris. I host the YouTube channel Dirty Tesla, where I talk a lot about Tesla's autopilot and full self-driving. And today I'm going to show you some of the basics on how you use autopilot and full self-driving and the more advanced capabilities that it also has. So this is my 2021 Tesla Model Y. It has hardware 3. There is no radar in this car, but the differences between hardware 3 and hardware 4 are pretty much nothing from the end user customer perspective, but it is good to know which hardware the car has. I am also currently on version 11.4.9. There is full self-driving version 12 floating out there somewhere. We're hoping Tesla, releases that to more people soon. But as of now, version 12 will be a little better, maybe have some newer capabilities that version 11 doesn't have. But for the most part, the idea is that the car can drive you from point A to point B with driver supervision. So you're not napping, you're not reading a book, you turn the system on, and it can maybe drive you point A to point B with you doing nothing, but you take over if the car is being too slow or tries to do something dangerous. So today we'll hop in the car and we will check out the features that it has, so let's get in there. All right, so before you hop out on the road, there are some options you have here with your autopilot or full self-driving settings. If you have the full self-driving software that you've paid for, you'll have all of these settings. But if we start over here at traffic aware cruise control, that is no auto steer. The vehicle will just modulate its speed if you turn this on based on the car in front of you, or it will go the speed limit or whatever speed you set with the right scroll wheel. Moving over to auto steer beta, you have to accept some claims here saying that you'll be safe and use it responsibly and that it's beta and all these things. You have some more options here. Now in this mode, the car will steer itself in the lane, although on a road like this it won't work. It needs nice lane lines. It will not make turns. It won't stop at stop signs. Sometimes it depends on your software exactly, but it basically enables some more capabilities. You can then summon the car and do other things in this menu, but for this video we're focusing on autopilot and full self-driving.
So I have it set for single stalk, single pull. So all I have to do is press down on here one time, and that will enable the software. Again, on this road, this won't work, but it will work when we move up to full self-driving beta. There's also a strike system, so I guess we should talk about this. The car is watching you a couple of ways. Number one, you can see up here, let me move the camera for you, up there. There's actually a driver monitor camera looking at your eyes mostly, or your head position, to make sure you're paying attention to the road. If you are kicked out of the software 5 times, you'll be banned from using it for 1 week. Tesla had that system, but also NHTSA, the safety organization, ramped that up a bit and made it a little more strict. So that is something you have to pay attention to. But today what we're using is full self-driving beta. So you move over here, there is more that you have to accept, including by enabling FSD beta, I can send to Tesla's collection of VIN-associated image data, and they use this to improve the system over time and make it better. So we'll click yes, we agree to that, because I want to use the system, so I agree to it. So first of all, you can select your driving profile in full self-driving beta. So you have chill, which will give you a bigger following distance to the car in front of you than average will, and you'll have an even bigger following distance in average than you will from assertive. And you can switch between these however you like while you're driving or whatever. Also, lane changes will be a little more aggressive. Maybe not the behavior, but the amount of lane changes will be more in this setting versus chill. You'll have less lane changes. The car will just kind of like hang out where it is to get to its destination. You can have notifications for your lane changes if you want it to chime at you, vibrate your steering wheel, or do both before it will make a lane change. I find in full self-driving this is not really useful because the car will do this at the same time it starts making a lane change, so I use that off, or I leave that off most of the time. And then the last thing, which can be pretty useful but we won't use today, is minimal lane changes, and that is so the car will not really pass slower traffic. Basically, when you're on the highway, it'll just kind of sit where it is. If the car in front of you is going 70 and your speed is set to 75, the Tesla will just wait. If this is turned off, as it is here, if you're going 70 or you're set to 75, the car in front of you is going 70, it will then pass that car, which we'll see later in the video. So let's get on to driving. So because we have FSD beta enabled and because we have a destination set, we should be able to just put the car in drive, give it 1 second to get ready here, and a little gray steering wheel will pop up in the top right there, or the top left, sorry, and it's ready, and all I have to do is press this one time, and the car will start driving itself. Now, the other piece of information that Tesla is using, excuse me, to make sure that you are paying attention to the road is some weight on the steering wheel. So you can see it's set to 55 here. That's a bit fast for my taste. So I'm gonna use this right scroll wheel, and we're gonna go down to 30. You can see it's driving on the dirt road, really with no problem here. Even at the faster speed, it was doing okay. But you need a little torque on the steering wheel for the car to know you're paying attention. So a little bit of weight to the right or a little bit of weight to the left. Now you can keep your hands off for short amounts of time, but it will bug you, and if you don't listen to it, then it will kick you out. So here you can see the car's being a tiny bit rude, but I'm not doing anything. It does move over. It does give that person room. We pass no problem. Personally, I would move over a little earlier, but that's all personal preference. So we will continue driving here, and I will point out key moments in what the car is doing and how it's handling different. Go faster, I can go over to Munro Associates. All right, so as we approach our first turn here, you can see the car is telling us stopping for stop sign. It lets us know what it's doing in most common scenarios. It will make complete stops at the stop sign, meaning it gets down to 0. Before it creeps up, it says creeping forward for visibility. It's just trying to look in both directions. And then it will complete the maneuver now that it sees the road is clear. So a perfect job handling that left turn. No traffic to contend with, but the car did a good job. So it is continuing on here, and it will go up to the posted speed limit of 55. You can adjust that. If I'd like to go faster, I can bump it up, or I can bump it down, whatever I like. And it gets that information either from the map data that it has, or it will read the speed limit signs and get the data from there. So another thing to mention is how this car is doing this, what information it's using. It has 8 exterior cameras, 3 in the front, 2 on each side, and then 1 in the back, and it uses those to make decisions. Now, hardware 4 actually only has 2 front-facing cameras, but as I said, the user experience side doesn't really change. So here's our first warning. Apply slight turning force to the steering wheel. I've been waiting for that to pop up, and as I wait, it will blink more. And then we'll get an audible warning that will say, you better touch the steering wheel. There you go. And all I gotta do is put a little weight on the side there. The system is happy, it knows I'm paying attention. If you let that continue, you will get a strike. You'll get kicked out of using the software. You actually will not be able to use it until you put the car in park and drive again. And if you get 5 of those, that's when you get banned for 1 week. Going around curves and bends in the road like this are no problem. You can actually see on the display there that the car sees that well ahead of time and is planning to continue there. So at this point, I guess we can talk about the graphics on the screen. So if I expand these, you can see them a little bit better. And this is what the car sees around it. The road, the other vehicles, bicycles, pedestrians, motorcycles, all of those things. The blue line in front of the car is basically the car's plan, its intention on where it's going to go, what it's going to do next. When the line is dark blue, it means we're proceeding, we're moving along. As you come to a stop sign or, a stopped car or anything you need to stop for, the line will turn to a light blue to kind of indicate that we're going to stop, we're going to wait there. And it will show a black line as well to show you where it is actually going to stop for stop signs or wherever it needs to stop. Now another point here, you can see we're getting past. It's because the car did not up its speed for the increased speed limit here. So one of the problems that the system has is, in Michigan at least, I'm not sure in other states how it works, but we have signs that say end speed limit. And so it doesn't say the new speed limit, it just says that the speed limit has ended. And when that happens, it means the speed limit is actually 55, not whatever it was previously. The car does not detect those, and it will just stay at that slower speed. Now it should go around this garbage truck, but since it's moving, it's gonna wait for them, which I think is actually the legal thing to do while they're moving, especially with a double yellow here. But once they stop, the car should have the ability to go around. Now if it doesn't, yeah, there you go. So the car's doing that all on its own. I didn't touch or do anything. It's smart enough to know that, all right, that vehicle is not supposed to be stopping there. I'm not sure if it detects the hazard lights or not, but whatever information it's using, it says, hey, this is okay to go around this vehicle, even with the double yellow. That is the right maneuver. You see the person in front of us did it, and the person behind us did the same thing as well. So another area, I'm going to take over right here, because what the car is going to want to do is it's going to want to wait for this gap up here to legally enter this left turn lane. And of course, we don't want to just stay in the road and block traffic. So in this scenario, it's very easy for me. I tapped the brake and just steered over here, and then I can continue. The person behind me actually did the exact same thing. And so now I can re-engage, and the system will stay here and wait for its left turn at the traffic light. But just to get out of the way, because we're not going to technically legally follow that double yellow, I took over to position us a little more politely. So the car, you can see, is trying to go around them for some reason, so I just can pull the wheel. I didn't touch the brake that time, and take control from the car. So we do have a green arrow, and the car will move right through there. So there you go, right in a row. You could see a couple of mistakes there that the car made that are very easy to correct for just by either pulling the wheel or tapping the brake.
Yeah, this is a Jaguar I-Pace that has been outfitted with our suite of our self-driving system, all of our sensors, and everything that's been integrated with the vehicle to make it fully autonomous.
Any particular reason you settled on the Jaguar I-Pace as opposed to anything else?
Yeah, so Jaguar is a company, I think, that kind of shares our vision of L4 autonomy, and so we were very excited to partner with them in developing this as the modifications to this vehicle as kind of the platform for our autonomous vehicle. The other thing I think that makes this a perfect pairing for Waymo's autonomous suite is the fact that it's a premium all-electric SUV, and it's really just sort of incredibly well suited to the task of being a ride-hailing platform for L4 driving in an urban environment.
Yeah, you mentioned the sensor package. Can you walk us through which sensors have been added to the vehicle versus which ones? Well, do you tap into any of them that are already there?
Yeah, we don't tap into any of the sensors that are in the vehicle for the purposes of self-driving. I can talk a little bit about our sensor suite. So we have 4 types of sensors. 3 of them kind of visual sensors, and the last one an audio sensor. So on the visual side, I think the one that people are most familiar with is camera, right? So camera are there to offer, kind of an extremely rich view of the environment. We have more than 20 cameras on the vehicle, and different styles of camera, ones that are better suited for long range, closer range, some of them that are better for seeing at night, things like that. So that's camera. Camera is a passive sensor in that it relies on light from the sun or the environment or headlights and things like that. And so we also have a couple of active sensors. The first one is LiDAR. So LiDAR sends out little points of light and then measures how long it takes for those to come back. And by doing so, it can figure out how far away those objects are. So that creates kind of this 3D structure of the world that we can understand. And you can imagine kind of how rich that becomes when you pair it with the pixel you've got from the cameras. The third one is radar. And so radar is really great at doing things like seeing through fog or rain. And so for weather, it gives us, almost like superhuman vision. And being able to see through those, and is really, critical for things like weather. It also allows us, to do things like, see around corners and see kind of fast moving objects and let us anticipate those a little bit better. And then the last one is audio, and audio is kind of sometimes forgotten a little bit, but is really, really critical for driving in, the urban canyons, that we're seeing around us. For instance, if there are emergency vehicles that might be approaching from around the corner, you can hear them long before you can see them. And so with our external audio recorders, our ears, we're able to, we're able to perceive emergency vehicles, where they're coming from, whether they're approaching us or receding, and just make better decisions about how to, stay out of their way and make sure that first responders are able to, safely get where they need to
We're in
be.
a few vehicle platforms that's actually taken that into account. I've brought that up on a couple of occasions where binaural audio, for that reason, emergency vehicles tends to be lacking. So thank you for adding that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you walk through where the sensors are located? I'm not sure if you can see them from your point of view, though.
So I can see kind of the bottom of some of them above me, right? So kind of the bulk of the sensors are in this package that's mounted on the roof. So including our long range LiDAR that's spinning around the top. That's a LiDAR that can see many football fields away, and is really very well suited for higher speed roads and things like that, or just seeing things that are further away. It's also mounted very high on the vehicle, so we can often see over other vehicles. We also have kind of an array of cameras that are up there that are also kind of well suited for that task. But beyond that, especially to make sure that we can interact safely with pedestrians, with vulnerable road users that might be very, very close to the vehicle, we have both LiDAR, camera, and radar that are kind of positioned at the edges of the vehicle, so that we can see objects that are very, very close in around the vehicle and make sure that we are kind of maneuvering safely around those.
So other than the audio system, which I do find fascinating, how do you see Waymo's differentiated from, say, other robotaxi services? Let's say Pony AI, Baidu, Tim, just to name a few.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think right now the largest differentiator is that if you look at the front seat, there's no driver there, right? So we are fully autonomous. We're fully autonomous in challenging urban environments, in higher speed roads in suburbia, on the freeway. And so, I'd say, first of all, the biggest differentiator is, just the fact that the Waymo driver is in control, and that we are not relying on, a supervision in the driver's seat to take over or anything like that. So I think that's, the strongest differentiator is just kind of our, the fact that we're actually out there. We're actually serving, tens of thousands of trips a week to real users who love the service. So, I would say that's obviously kind of the biggest differentiator. But I think that there's a couple of other things that really kind of set us apart from, just even other ride-hailing providers. The first thing that I think we always like to lead off with is our tremendous safety record. We have, both within our internal studies as well as studies that have been conducted by third parties that have analyzed our data, shows that we are significantly better than human drivers, even drivers that focus on ride hailing, and to the point that when we look statistically at our safety record over the miles that we've driven, we have prevented, on the order of, 25 or even more injury-causing collisions, right? Prevented them, right? Or just not had them. And like, to me, that is just such an incredibly powerful stat when you think about it. That's 25 people, who weren't injured, who didn't have to go to the hospital, who are, still able to take care of their kids, who aren't in pain, right? Because of the impact of vehicle collisions, and so that's the thing I think that brings me to work every day, and that I'm really most proud of. Beyond that, we're here in a Jaguar. This is a premium service. I could be sitting in this car and I'd have it entirely to myself. There isn't a driver who's listening in on any confidential or romantic or sensitive conversation that I might be having. If I want to fall asleep in the backseat and not even worry if I'm snoring, then I've got that opportunity. This is really my space, and so I think that the customizability of the vehicle, because it's my space, the premium service, obviously our safety record. And the fact that we don't have a driver behind the wheel, I think those are really the things that set apart Waymo from, any other ride-hailing service, autonomous or not.
Interesting. So you mentioned like 10,000 something rides per week. How many vehicles do you have in the fleet right now?
Yeah, tens of thousands of rides per week. We don't share specific numbers, but in the hundreds in San Francisco, in the hundreds in Phoenix, and more in Los Angeles and Austin. Those are the 4 cities that we are fully autonomous in. No supervised drivers behind the wheel for the vehicles that are in that are conducting the Waymo One service. Beyond that, we have vehicles that have gone on what we call Waymo road trips to 25 more cities. That we've brought them there to do a couple of things. First of all, drive around and understand how those other cities, might be a little bit different than the cities that we're
Questions
in.
on that coming up?
Some of those cities have different
Questions on that coming up.
What's that?
Go ahead.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Great. So many other vehicles that we've taken on road trips and used to get more data for our engineering teams, and to be able to introduce people to what an autonomous vehicle looks like, to kind of plant the seeds in their minds of what the future of transportation looks like.
Yeah. So leading into that, like you mentioned, the 4 cities; those are typically dry, sunny areas. How do the Waymo vehicles handle, say, rain, heavy rains, or God forbid, snow?
Yeah, absolutely. Just because, Phoenix, San Francisco, LA are typically dry and sunny, doesn't mean that they don't have their fair share of pretty extreme weather. March of last year in San Francisco brought some very extreme storms, high winds, a ton of rain. And we were thrilled to be able to keep our service up and running through all of that, which was really just very exciting to have established kind of the proof point on being able to continue to operate in those types of weather. Phoenix as well has things like dust storms and its own extreme rain kind of during the monsoon season there, and so we are very proud, as I mentioned, to be able to get to the point where we can handle basically all kinds of weather in all of the cities that we're in. But that being said, we can't yet handle all kinds of weather, and so I kind of mentioned the road trip point a little bit earlier. Just this winter, we brought our vehicles out to Buffalo to be able to experience some of the snow there and to be able to collect some data on what that looks like. Previously, we brought them to New York kind of for the same reason. And so that really gave us an opportunity to collect additional data in those environments and be able to tackle those, in the future.
Okay. What would you say to someone who is apprehensive or even resistant to an autonomous vehicle? Like if you're trying to get them in the vehicle, how would you encourage that or alleviate some of their fears?
The first thing that I would say is I absolutely understand. It is quite an experience. Everybody remembers the first drive that they had in a fully autonomous Waymo, and just looking out at the front seat here and seeing the steering wheel, kind of move by itself. I absolutely understand the apprehension. going back 100 years ago, people had that same apprehension when people removed elevator operators, right? Who controlled the elevator to move up and down. And I think that it's always understandable to have an apprehension when you see new technology. But one thing that I will say is that for all of the people that get in the car and hit start ride and watch it start moving, the first 30 seconds are absolutely thrilling, and then they start to settle in and feel that not only does this feel very human-like, but it feels like one of the most competent, safest drivers that they've ever experienced. And so very, very rapidly, and I've done this with probably dozens of people, very, very rapidly they gain kind of this extreme level of comfort with the technology, and almost unilaterally they end up loving it. And so to that person I would say, I understand, but the technology has matured to the point that everybody should give it a try. And when we see that people give it a try, they just want to come back and they just want to experience it again.
Since you're about the destination, could you walk us through the process of like how you would hail a cab, what the fares are, what's the overall user experience like?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have an app. It's in the App Store on Apple and the Play Store on Android, and essentially. For a user that wanted to experience the Waymo One service, they would go and download that app. They would sign up, and then as they get into any of our service territories, they would be able to hail a Waymo vehicle. As they kind of queue it up to hail, they need to select kind of the destination that they want to go to. The app will ask you to confirm kind of both your pickup and your drop-off location, and then it'll give you an estimated time until you're picked up and an estimated time of your arrival. Something that I think you talked about differentiators with other ride-hailing services, because we have all of the vehicle supply kind of under our control. I think that we're able to offer people a lot more surety about the vehicles that are being assigned to them and things like that. Individual Waymo vehicle is not necessarily going to cancel just because they want to go on their lunch break, for instance. At that point, the vehicle shows up. You have the opportunity to unlock the doors with your app so that it can verify that it's you. You get in, you put on your seatbelt, and then there's a button on the display here that says Start Ride. You press that button, and off you go. Then, as you get closer to your destination, you get the warning, we heard that your destination is getting close. Remember to take all of your objects with you. Get out, close the door. And the vehicle goes off on its way to pick up the next user.
Okay. Are there any options for ride sharing? Like maybe you and someone else are in the same general direction. Is there a way to say, yeah, I'm okay with another stranger in the vehicle?
Yeah. Right now we don't do that. That is something that we're exploring. I think right now one of the things that our users really love is that it's their own environment, right? It's their own car, and so that's something that we've really been building on. That being said, at the right time, I think we'll look out for opportunities for doing things like ride pooling and sharing those because just because of the efficiency that it offers and maybe cost savings opportunities also for our users.
Given an EV, how do you manage range? Are you probably monitoring battery status and whatnot, and then does the vehicle have to return home to get charged or something like that?
Yeah, we have various hubs and depots and things like that positioned around the cities and that we operate in, and there is logic that's running on the vehicle that monitors the battery percentage and kind of the available range that's left, and then with plenty of time so that they don't get stuck out there, will return to a charger that gets allocated to each vehicle, and then it's charged for as long as it needs to be able to go out and serve more users, more trips. And actually the process for doing this, it's one of those things where in order to operate efficiently, even kind of building up a super efficient process for figuring out when to charge, how long to charge, what charger to use, and things like that is yet kind of another challenge that we had to overcome, and a real opportunity for kind of fleet level efficiency as we make sure that we're sending out the right vehicle to the right part of the city bringing it back at the right time,
Okay,
etc.
that's all interesting. I think it's about all the time we have for today, but we'll definitely want to dive more into technical details on a separate call. Probably the Q&A session coming up, but thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview and for the demo. I'm definitely thoroughly impressed with what I saw over your shoulder this whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, thank you for the opportunity to answer some of these questions. I think what we're really excited about is helping people to understand this technology, even if it's over a video. But most excited about giving people the opportunity to experience it for themselves, because that's really when the magic happens. So, so thank you for the time, and thanks for the opportunity to talk a little bit about Waymo.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Fox. I'm Munro Associates, low voltage systems engineer. I'm here today with Edwin Olson, CEO of May Mobility, and we're here at their production center in Ann Arbor. So, you want to take us for a quick tour?
Welcome to the production center. This is where our vehicles get tested and validated before they get sent off to customer sites. We just shipped out a huge bunch of vehicles, so it's a little empty today. But you can see some of the things that we do here. We do camera calibration and validation here. We also make sure that for our wheelchair accessible vehicles that those are working properly. And here's one of our vehicles with a wheelchair ramp in the back. So we've designed our vehicles so that our customers can choose to have wheelchair accessible vehicles, which is part of our do the right thing kind of philosophy about public transit.
Fair.
And what most people are most interested in is the autonomous vehicle itself. So we have one vehicle here that kind of showing off all of its hardware. So we're an all of the above kind of approach to autonomy. We believe in LiDARs, cameras, and radars.
Good.
Basically what's going to make the job safe and cost effective. So this vehicle has 5 LiDARs. There's a big LiDAR on the roof, and then smaller LiDARs around each corner. And the smaller LiDARs are primarily to fill in blind spots. So if I was here, the large LiDAR is not going to be able to see me, but the little LiDARs can. So all in, that's 5 LiDARs, but these are also pretty low-cost LiDARs. These are all 905 nanometer amplitude modulated LiDAR.
Okay.
So the real goal here is to keep the bill of materials price down, because it's really important to us to build a business that makes financial sense as well. There's also about 9 cameras on this vehicle, so cameras on each of these little side clusters, as well as 3 cameras up on the roof, and then a traffic light camera right underneath the rear view mirror.
So you're not leveraging any of the built-in hardware, right? You're only using your own add-ons?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and so part of that is to be at least reasonably vehicle agnostic. Today we're showing you the Sienna, but we do actually work on some other platforms like the Toyota e-Palette. Okay. And then there's also radar. So radar, we've got a number of radars on this vehicle. There's a couple underneath the sides, the ears as we call them, up here. There's a front-mounted radar, and then a couple more radars in the back as well.
Are those 77 gigahertz ones?
Yes, very standard ACC style radars. Okay. Again, keeping the bill of materials price as low as possible.
And what megapixel cameras are you using in general?
I actually don't remember the exact resolution, but they're not exotic.
Okay.
So these are pretty low-cost cameras. The other thing that's a little different about our vehicle is that we have our computer inside the vehicle. So the computer is where the passenger seat would be. And this turns out to be really nice from an environmental packaging perspective. We don't have to provide another weatherproof enclosure and then somehow get cool air there. We can leverage a lot of the watertight infrastructure we already have. And for a deployment where you don't want someone reaching over and messing with the steering wheel, you generally don't want someone sitting up here anyway.
True.
So that's worked out really well. That actually came from feedback from some of our first deployments where we had the computer originally in the trunk.
Which is where most of them would put it anyways, yes.
Yeah, and the question was, where do I put my luggage? Where do I put my groceries?
that's the problem, yes.
So we've been able to open up the entire trunk, which allows us to have storage or the wheelchair accessibility.
So for the computer, I know most of these seem to be hybrids. Are you tapping into the 12-volt system, the high voltage system? Do they have their own dedicated power source? Like, how does all that work?
Yeah, so this is a hybrid system. We try not to get too close to the high voltage system. I actually don't remember on this particular design. We've gone back and forth between whether we're on the 12 volt or the 400 volt rail.
Okay.
So one of the things that you need to do when you've got an autonomous vehicle is you can put sensors on it, but then you need to know where are the sensors on the vehicle. And so we've designed sensor mounts, but if you just attach the sensor to the sensor mount, you're going to be off by potentially multiple degrees.
Correct.
So the goal of this jig is to have a car just drive in, be able to see these external targets. And the nice thing is that these targets can be viewed by both the LiDAR and the camera. So we can bring both of those into the same coordinate system. So the vehicle drives in, collects a bunch of data, thinks deep thoughts for a while, and comes out with calibration data.
That's a great way of putting it. Okay, with that, I think we're ready to go for a tour then?
Let's go for a ride.
Yeah, let's go.
So we're going to go for a ride. We do have a safety driver today. One of the things that's kind of cool about this route is that you're going to see a lot of places where the vehicle totally got it, just nails it. You also take you to more complicated areas where could even be interventions, but that's what we love about Ann Arbor, and we get to see the full spectrum. So the goal of this kind of demo ride is for you to get a sense of like, hey, here's where the envelope is, here's where it starts getting trickier.
So for frame of reference, those who are not from the Michigan area, Ann Arbor offers a lot of traffic and pedestrian challenges outside of a typical large city.
So what happens now is we've requested a ride. The teleassist operators are making sure we're all buckled in, that everything looks good, and then we'll hear the doors lock as the signal that the vehicle is about to go.
So how long do you have to get into the vehicle before it decides that you're a no-show?
A long time. So the remote operator could eventually cancel it if they're like, what's going on here?
Okay. I'm just thinking if someone's coming in with car seats and whatnot, that can be a bit of an ordeal sometimes.
Totally. And that's a good example of why you would want to have a human in the loop, because a lot of those things are hard to fully automate. So someone remotely can look in and be like, oh, yeah, they're dealing with car seats. I'm not going to release the car and have it go somewhere else. One of the things you'll notice is that we go into a lot of parking lots, and parking lots are super challenging because you've got obstructed sight lines and cars can start moving. This is an unprotected right turn. But our customers want us to drop them off at the door. So
which is a parking lot, yeah. Do we have any Michigan lefts or unprotected lefts on the route we're going to be taking?
Multiple.
Good. Okay, those tend to be much more difficult.
For sure. Now in the office park, they're usually not quite that exciting. This is an unprotected left. Although there's some traffic here. That guy's booking it. And one of the things that is kind of cool is that we can even detect when other cars are being non-compliant, when they're about to speed through or do something that they really shouldn't be doing.
Now it looks like we have a thunderstorm rolling in. Is this still going to work when it's in a downpour or anything like that, or do we not care?
We definitely care. So light rain is usually not an issue. So kind of the rule of thumb, I think I mentioned this on our podcast, is that if your windshield wipers are doing this, we're fine.
Yep.
If your windshield wipers are doing this, we're going to suspend service. But that's part of the fun of operating in cities that have weather, that we're getting that data. We're starting to figure out how to handle those kinds of problems.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because a lot of the companies who develop these AVs, they it works so perfectly, but they're in Southern California where you get like, what, half inch of rainfall a year?
Exactly right. So we've actually arrived at Thai Spoon, the free advertisement here, really good pad Thai. We're going to head up Stone School Road here a little bit. So we have the same thing going on right now. I've requested the next stop. The remote operator is making sure we're all seat belted.
Take the remote operators watching from the various cameras.
That's right.
Okay. To see one rear facing there. That looks like be one next to you.
And our vehicles that are designed for driver out actually have additional cameras and some additional buttons in the front. So, for actually confirming you're ready to go, you would hit a button as well to say, hey, I'm good to go.
Okay. And so theoretically, no one's even allowed in the driver's seat normally, right?
Correct.
Okay. What would need to happen for you guys to remove the steering wheel?
Congress would have to change the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety
Fair
Standards.
Enough. Okay.
So, this one, it's a great question because it comes up a lot. Like, what kind of vehicle would you want for an autonomous vehicle? And so clearly one without a steering wheel makes a lot of sense. Why couldn't we turn that into seating?
Right.
But today, the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards require those manual controls like a steering wheel and brake pedals.
Okay.
So the Sienna, actually, I think we have one of the best vehicles for commercializing autonomous vehicles today, because it's a mass market vehicle that's street legal in all 50 states. It's It's also a very practical vehicle. It's a hybrid, good gas mileage. It's not that expensive. So I think this is a place where May has the best vehicle supply chain of any AV company. It's an unprotected right. And so here you can see the display. We're tracking cars moving across. This is a combination of camera and LiDAR data.
That is pretty clean. A lot of them I've seen, they get really choppy and vehicles are heavily pixelated.
And of course, we're at a red light, so we're going to go straight through here. The traffic light is being detected with a camera just underneath the rear view mirror.
Interesting how it pumped the brakes as this guy crept out of the intersection.
Exactly, yep. And very short reaction time. Our vehicle is watching and making predictions. There's a probability distribution over what it's going to do next. Is that guy going to try to sneak out ahead of us, or is he really going to come to a stop? And so the way our technology works is that we're running many Monte Carlo simulations to try to learn what the best policy is for the one-of-a-kind situation that we are actually in. And so what's unique about our technology is that our vehicle is actually learning as it's driving. So we're trying to learn what the best policy is for the one-of-a-kind situations that we are experiencing right now. So under that seat, that's where our computer lives, right in front of you there. And it's doing thousands of these Monte Carlo rollouts, doing them fast enough that it can actually learn how to respond to the situation we're in right now. Oh, we caught a yellow light. So vehicle there, that's a great example. Should the vehicle brake or go?
Yeah, that was, driver's ed. It was always, where is the yellow light versus the mirror, and that was like the decision criteria.
Right, and even that's actually a pretty bad
good.
First order approximation. Because if there's a car right on your butt, what should you do?
Yep.
Then you probably want to go, or at least bias yourself towards going, because you don't want to slam on the brakes in order to get rear-ended.
Correct.
Now suppose there's someone right behind you, but there's a pedestrian that's starting to cross in front of you, jumping the gun a little bit. Well, now the answer actually is to brake hard again. And so this is a really good example of how very small changes to what's happening around the vehicle change what the right answer is.
Yeah.
And expecting the vehicle to ship from the data center with the rule book, it says exactly how to handle everything, it doesn't work.
Okay, so we just got back from our ride and drive. I don't know what the proper term for that is.
Sounds good.
Whatever. Our butt in seat time, which was actually very good. I gotta say, I was thoroughly impressed. Constantly seeing the decision making rather than the vehicle being just purely reactionary to everything that's in front of it. It's actually making the decisions of what is someone likely to do, even if that's not within the confines of the law. So I definitely do appreciate and respect that. So the question is, what's next for May Mobility at this point?
So we feel like we're at a point right now where the technology is far enough along that we can operate without safety drivers in more limited environments. In fact, we did our first deployment without safety drivers in Sun City, Arizona at the end of last year.
Good, okay.
Which is big for us, big barrier. Over this year, you're going to see a couple more driver out sites. Okay. That's the right way. Yeah. Without a driver. And those are really good for unit economics, but also to help communicate to the world where we think we've nailed the technology problem. But of course, we'll also be expanding with sites where there will still be a safety driver. And those are really important for us because we're getting a huge amount of data from the places that we operate with safety drivers. That's a core part of our business model.
Okay. Any thoughts on licensing the technology?
Well, I think there's a lot of applications for the technology. Obviously, what we build could be used for ADAS as well.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm thinking.
And so we do talk with folks about that kind of thing. But one thing to keep in mind is that we are a really vision-oriented company. One of the things that we're really passionate about is that we want to make cities more beautiful and more accessible, and we don't want to contribute to just more cars.
Okay,
people taking their personally owned cars downtown. So we really want to create long-term incentives for people to use public transit as opposed to more cars downtown.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so we're going to be doing a question and answer session with industry experts and whatnot to go through levels of SAE autonomy from 0 to 5. I've been told you were part of defining some of that. Can you elaborate, the pros and the cons, what you like and don't like about that system?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you have to go kind of in the way back machine to what was the context when we were doing this.
Okay.
And the context of the levels was really around personally owned cars. if you go out and you buy a car, how frequently can you expect it to be in autonomous mode versus not autonomous mode?
Okay.
That's not the way the industry's evolved at all. So that did not foresee robo-taxis. It didn't foresee autonomous vehicles like what we provide. So where level 4 is great, right?
Yeah.
We thought originally level 4 would be just a step onto where the car could go anywhere. But what we've really seen is a mass adoption of level 4 as a great end goal unto itself. If you can build a map, you can operate there, you can do a lot of good, even if there are some places off map you can't go. So I think that's one big change, that the use cases for autonomous vehicles are just very different than what was envisioned. I think critically, one of the problems with the SAE levels is that giving them sequential numbers implies a ladder.
Yes.
That you go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. But there's some really big phase changes in there. When you go from the human is primary in control to the computer is primarily in control, that's not a step transition. It's a fundamental phase change.
Yep.
And the design of the system, the design of the human factors all change dramatically in a much bigger way than a number going from 3 to 4 would seem to indicate. So to do it again, I might try to figure out a way that both figures out the other use cases that go beyond personal car ownership, but also to highlight in a better way where those big changes are.
Yeah, because I've always struggled with, from 0 to 1, pretty straightforward. 1 to 2, pretty straightforward again. But once you get that jump from 2 to 3, it's just kind of vague, especially the way the SAE defines it, of like, the car can handle most situations. Well, how do we define most?
Yes, and the driver will be given a sufficient transition period.
Yeah, the disengage time frame, right, which seems to be the eternal struggle. And then obviously 3 to 4 is pretty easy if we've removed the driver fundamentally. And then 5 is, again, kind of wishy-washy again.
One day, well, sure, level 5 will happen one day.
Anywhere, anytime, any condition, it's like, okay, I see where you're going with this, but to your point, like, that is an astronomical jump from...
That's right. Well, and I think part of the problem is you go from like in the 3-ish range. 3 is kind of almost like a no man's land for human factors.
Yes.
From a technology perspective, you can imagine designing a system that might be able to provide adequate notice, 4 seconds, 6 seconds, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But to a human who has zoned out, fallen asleep, is watching a movie, there's a human factors aspect here that humans are just really bad at that kind of phase transition. And so the overall system concept needs to reflect not only what can the technology do, but how can it successfully interact with humans who are merely flesh and blood and full of all the challenges that comes with.
All right. Well, thank you again for having us. Really appreciate it.